Now we're going to talk about something called temporal aspect in ASL. It relates to something we talked about earlier, which is that movement has meaning in ASL, and it can actually change the meaning in ASL. So let's break this down a little bit. The word aspect means information contained in a predicate that tells us how the action of the predicate is done. So in ASL, aspect in predicates can be in the form of verbs or adjectives. Temporal aspect, temporal referring to time, is the way signs are adjusted to show time, particularly duration and frequency. It's how the action of the verb is performed with reference to time. So in English, we tend to use additional words to convey this same type of information, right? In ASL, we actually change the structure. We change how we sign something to indicate time or temporal aspect. So to show temporal aspect in ASL, the hand shape and the palm orientation stay the same, but the movement changes. And sometimes the location can change a little bit too because the movement is changing. So these are the 4 different movement changes that show temporal aspect. First, this is one that's generally used to report facts. So something that's sort of over time or regularly. So duration would go in a circular motion. Frequency would be just a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So over time, continually is that circular duration movement, and regularly, back and forth, indicates the frequency. Now, both of these can indicate what's equivalent to the English word regularly, but because regularly is kind of vague in English, keep this in mind. The top movement, that kind of circular moving like this, is more about something that's recurring or routine, while the bottom sort of refers to something that's a steady repetition, something that's incessant, just keeps going. All right. So the next one is generally used to report opinions about facts. So the previous one that we just looked at is a fact. This keeps happening. This one is kind of an opinion. It's sort of how you feel, what you think about the fact. Okay. So for the top one refers to a prolonged period of time. It is a circular motion, but it's more of an oval that just kind of keeps going and repeating. This inflection is made with a slower, repeated elliptical movement, kind of a thrust and return, okay? So that refers to an unusual duration. Like this was just ridiculously long kind of thing. So long is a fact. Ridiculously long is an opinion about the fact, for example, okay? So you can see the next one that's used to report opinions about facts, the bottom one there, is kind of a weird shape. So it's straightforward and then kind of around and straightforward again and then around, repeated. So this is for the concept of like over and over again, a repeated cycle. This is sort of an unusual frequency. Like it's done and then not, and then done again, and then not, and then done again, right? So over and over and over. So the choice concerning which verb inflection the signer will use is very much dependent upon the signer's perception of the event. Do you think this is ridiculously long, for example? Or do you think, yeah, it took a long time, but it's just kind of a fact. It's a long time, right? So you can choose a different sort of temporal aspect depending on what you're trying to convey, depending on how you see the event or the verb, what you're talking about. So we're going to assign some examples of temporal aspect. Okay. So this is the sign for drive. We're going to change that sign we're going to change the sign by changing the movement, I guess I should say. And this is a temporal aspect. So we're going to change the sign so that it indicates time a little bit differently. So this is just drive, right, by itself. So the first temporal aspect movement there at the left would be kind of a repeated like circular motion like this. You might be saying, I drive to work through traffic. I just keep it going and going and going and going. Okay. The second temporal aspect movement here is that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That might be used for something like, I always drive to work. I drive on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and I drive. Okay. The next one, the next two, remember, are the opinions added to the facts. This is your perception of how long the driving takes. Okay. So this first one, well, the first of of the two on the right, the third one over is that longer elliptical movement, remember? So that would be used in something like, we drove for 2 days to get to grandma's house. Now, if that feels like forever to you, you just be like, drive. And then we just kept driving and driving. And again, that's an opinion added to that temporal aspect. It took 2 days. That's a fact. But if you feel like that was forever, then you're going to use this temporal aspect. We drove and drove and drove for 2 whole days to get to grandma's house. All right, the last one, the one on the far right, that movement is would be used with drive in an example like this one. Due to construction, I always drive to work through a lot of traffic. So you drive and then you do it again the next day, drive and then do it again the next day. Here we go. Driving through traffic repeatedly. All right. Here's another example of temporal aspect. So you can see in A, this is look at. All right. In B, there's no temporal aspect. That's just the sign look at. In B, you've got that little repeated movement. You just keep looking at it. C, that back and forth movement, you are looking at it frequently. All right. Something like I look at Facebook or something, right? Frequently. Then that larger movement that's in D is to look at something for a long time, like to stare at it. Okay. You just keep looking and looking for a long, long time with this movement. Okay. Here's another example related to the sign for sick. So if you remember, the sign for sick is like this. If you are sort of regularly sick, you're sick a lot, you're sick often. It's described here in Baker, Schenk, and Coakley's description as be continually sick as a regular matter of course, like you just are always sick. So this so you're going to do sick just with one hand though. And you're going to kind of repeat that little circular motion about sick, 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 sick. That just means you are regularly sick. You keep being sick. The second one is going to have that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is you're just sick, 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 sick a lot, sick frequently. All right. That's the regularly motion, frequently motion back and forth. Sick, 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 sick. All right. The next one is if you've been sick for a long time. Now, again, that's a perspective. That's an opinion. Some people can be sick for 2 days and feel like it's a long time. And some people can be sick for 3 months and feel like, yeah, that was a long time, right? So again, that's this movement relates to time, yes, but it's also got an opinion with it. So this is a bigger movement. So to be sick for long periods of time and really incapacitated is this description here. So bigger, see, watch my bigger movements instead of that small one like we did at the first. All right, the last one here is just to become sick again and again and again and again. I keep getting sick. So sick and then a big, so this one is more of trying to describe the difference between this one and the one we just did, but you can see, I won't try to describe it in English. You can see the arrows there. So you're going to be sick, 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 sick over and over. Okay, so just remember, in English, the duration and frequency of an event are described using additional words. I was really sick. I was sick for a really long time. It took us 2 whole days to get to grandma's house. But in ASL, you just describe duration and frequency of something by adjusting the sign itself.